Hey guys, we're looking at our brand new RXP catch cans that came in the mail. One of these is the dual can expansion that's going on my already purchased single can from about a year ago. The other is the complete kit that's going on my friend's 2011 to 14 model. We're actually re-recording this after the fact. Since the install was so easy, we're going to show you how to do both the clean install as well as the dual can update on both trucks. Whole install only takes about an hour, and aside from a drill on my 2015 and newer model, these are pretty much just plug and play setups. So, if you've already got one and you just want to see the install video, click right up here. So before diving into the actual install, I thought I'd do a quick review about how my current cans performed this past year and talk about why I went with RXP. I'd actually spent several weeks researching reviews out in different auto forums and comparison videos, and it really does look like you get what you pay for. From everything I looked up, these cans just seem to keep more out of your engines, and they actually seem to be the only company that keeps you from getting a check engine light, which is a huge nuisance across a lot of the other setups. You'll see more about that when we get to the later part of the video, but long story short, this has just been a seamless system that gets everything right the first time. So that's why I picked the can, and honestly, it's paid off ever since. I usually drain the can about every 2,000 miles, and the amount of sludge this thing has picked out of the engine has absolutely floored me. It's truly nasty. So I'm expecting that this should prevent a lot of those major issues that have popped up with these EcoBoost engines, or at least push it off to around 250,000 miles. I've only had one issue that popped up about halfway through the year, and that was with one of my one-way check valves. It was only partially failing, and by that partial fail, it dropped how much catch I was getting out of the can. But a quick email over to RXP was able to get them to identify the problem real quick, and they were great about getting a replacement part out to me quickly, so it's been smooth sailing ever since. And then when one of my colleagues started asking about the install on his truck, I pointed him where to go, and that's when I noticed that they had these dual cans, so decided we needed to jump in and get one too. So the reason I'm upgrading to the dual can is that my older version has a breather that replaces your oil cap. The breather was great because it lets the system pull fresh air from your air filter into the crankcase. The downside of this setup is that if you ever stomp on the gas, the engine ramps up your turbos, ultimately causing the crankcase to build up back pressure. Now, this is normal on every engine, and it's usually stopped by your oil cap. But with the breather setup, that reversing pressure pushes some of the oil vapors all the way back up to your inlet, which ultimately makes its way to your pistons. Now, this isn't a huge problem since most vapors still go through your main catch can, but the new setup adds the second can to collect absolutely everything that would get to your inlet valves regardless of how much you're on the accelerator. For the install, you're going to need a ratchet with an optional extension, a 10mm and two 11mm sockets, or a socket and a wrench, a 17mm socket, again, or wrench, a drill with a 9/16 drill bit, a hose cutter, but if you don't have one of those, you can use some sharp garden shears too, a flathead screwdriver, and two 7/8 inch wrenches, or you can use a crescent wrench or even a vice grip with a t-shirt. Another thing that's useful to have, although not required, is a 3/8 inch NPT tab, which we'll show you how to use later. So on our 2015 and newer fresh install, we've got our mounting bracket, hose adapter, and the dual catch can. The provided hoses will go from the catch can through the one-way check valves to the forward quick connects. These one-way check valves go on these two lines right here, and these two lines are what are providing the vacuum which draws the oil vapors into the catch can before getting clean and then going back out into the engine. So it's important to make sure that your one-way check valves are always pointing away from the can like that. For those that bought the dual can expansion like I did, it'll come with the new mounting bracket, the mini can itself, the 90-degree adapter which will go through the hose to the hose adapter on the right. Everything on the left are additions that I picked up, the new high flow check valves, and a modified mounting bracket for my setup. And that's everything in the box, so let's get to it. So if you've already got the old single can, we'll start by removing it from our engine and bringing it back to our workspace. From there, we'll remove the single can from its old bracket and install it in the new dual setup like this. Afterwards, we'll tighten everything down with the hex key. Now, if you've got the brand new setup, everything will look like this out of the box. Next, we'll loosely screw on our 90-degree hose adapters and then put together our one-way check valves, tightening everything down with our 7/8 inch wrenches. Now all that's left to do is put on our brackets using the 11mm bolts that are provided, and then tighten everything down just enough so that the brackets can move around freely. Now that we're back outside, we'll start by removing both of the 10mm bolts from our engine cover and set them aside for now. Next up is a 10mm retaining bolt for the antifreeze, which we'll completely unscrew but leave it where it is for now since we'll be coming back to it. We'll also remove the engine cover so we can get access to all those quick connects underneath it. We'll then install the dual can by mounting it under the antifreeze reservoir using the 10mm retaining bolt we just loosened from a minute ago. Next up is positioning the catch can and the hose adapters before tightening everything down. You'll need a 10mm for the antifreeze bolt, two 11mm sockets for each side of this bolt, and then one 11mm for the bolts that are going to the can. From here, I found it was easiest to remove these two adapters and set them aside for now, then tighten the two remaining adapters. We'll come back to this a little later. Next up is removing first of the two factory hoses. They have little gray tabs that you can push out on to pull them free. You won't need this hose for the rest of the install, but it's a good idea to keep it around in case you ever need to go back to your stock setup. From here, we'll move over to the driver's side hose, which is the one with the attached pressure sensor that's caused a lot of problems for other setups. This install will actually keep all the original vacuum lines and sensors where they currently are, so you don't ever have to worry about any of those same issues. You'll only need to remove the bottom side of the hose, but it actually makes the install easier by removing both sides and setting it on the engine block for now. Now it's time to start routing the new vacuum hoses. We'll start with the left side hose, which will go to our intake manifold, and we'll be using the straight quick connector shown there. Using a little water on the end of the quick connect will make sliding it onto the hose easier. And all these connections form a tight seal, so there's no need for any hose clamps. Once you've got it installed, then just click it on to the engine block and start to route your hose around. If you want a clean look, I've found that it's easiest to route it along the air intake, as well as put the cover back on to make sure you have enough space for the hose to go underneath it. After you've cut the length of hose, it's time to make a second cut farther up the line to put your one-way check valve in. Remember, you want the arrow pointing away from the can. And then, once you have the check valve installed in the line, you'll want to trim off any extra hose and then attach it to the left side of the can. Another useful trick you can use is to get some cable management velcros that they use on computer wires. Strung a couple of them together and then velcroed it to the plastic air intake manifold. Just to make everything look cleaner like this. Next up, we routed our center line to the passenger side valve cover using the 90-degree quick connect. Attach this hose here and route it like you did the first one. We ended up routing them side by side, which is why we removed the two 90-degree adapters from earlier because we had them in the wrong direction. Here's where I would recommend reinstalling them and then tightening them both down after you've got them set up in the direction you want them. Trim off the excess hose again and then attach it to the center line of the can. No check valve needed on this line. The next two lines will work on at the same time since they're so close. One of them goes to the driver's side turbo, and the other connects to the original F-150 line. The line going to the turbo is going to use a 90-degree quick connect, and it connects right here. The side going to the F-150 line will use a straight hose adapter, and it also attaches right here to that line. After connecting the turbo line, it's time to install the one-way check valve before connecting it to the right side of the main can. Cut your vacuum hose at the correct length for this line, then tighten down the hose adapter to the main can. From there, make your secondary cut at the length you'd like to put the check valve in. After you get the check valve installed, again with the arrow pointing away from the can, you can route the entire line under the air filter box and connect it to the can like this. I did this next part off camera, but after you have everything connected, this is how your main can should look. To make the next part of the install easier, we shifted gears to work on the side of the mini can going to the air filter. The line comes out on the side of the mini can right here. Then it will connect through the cover of your air filter box. The RXP instructions say the best spot to connect is right at the top here, and it's where I would have drilled if I hadn't already previously drilled a spot right here for my old breather setup. Pick a spot on the air filter box and drill a hole using a 9/16 drill bit. Again, this is the location I'd originally used, and this is the spot where I'll show you how to connect the hose. Now, the 9/16 drill bit is more than enough to install your plastic hose adapter, no problems. However, if you already have a 3/8 inch NPT tap like this, you can use it here to pre-thread the hole. Just make sure not to screw it in too far. Regardless of the method you use, you'll thread the plastic hose adapter in like this. Using a 17mm socket will also help you screw it in a little bit farther. Remember, these are plastic threads, so don't try to tighten it down at all. Just far enough so that you can see the last thread showing is plenty. Now that we've taken care of the earbox, we'll take our F-150 hose adapter and thread it onto the vacuum hose. We'll route it under this electrical harness, then connect it to the factory line. Then all we gotta do is connect the other side of the factory hose back to the engine. With our RXP hose connected to the F-150 line now, we'll route it up to the top of the mini can and then trim off any of the extra hose line before connecting it. Next we'll move back down to the side of the mini can and rotate the barb if needed so that it points to the back of the car. Then we'll attach our vacuum hose. This is the hose that will connect to the top of the airbox hole that we drilled out earlier. An easy way to reinstall the airbox cover is to install it upside down and then rotate it back around. Finally, all that's left to do is connect the hose to the barb on the airbox. One last check to make sure that the top of the mini can is connected to the stock F-150 hose. that the right side of the main can goes through the one-way check valve to the turbo inlet, that the center of the main can is connected to the passenger side valve cover, and that the left side of the main can goes through its one-way check valve to the intake manifold. If everything is routed correctly, all that's left to do is reinstall the engine cover, tighten down your 10mm bolts, and hey, you're done. Good luck on your install, guys. And hey, look, no check engine lights.